Today drained me, but here's everything you missed while we were on the clock. Undocumented immigrants will face jail time and fines if they fail to join the government watch list registry. GOP urges lawmakers to cancel town halls to avoid protests and backlash from their voters. Supreme Court likely to favor the straight woman in reverse discrimination lawsuit. Over 50,000 Cubans in Guantanamo are protesting Trump and Rubio's policies, which include a tighter U.S. blockade, reduced remittances, and Cuba's terror list designation, as well as migrant detentions at the torture center. An unvaccinated child died in Texas as measles outbreak reaches 124 cases, most of them among the unvaccinated. Trump ordered to reinstate federal workers he previously fired. The White House instructs agencies to prepare for large-scale staff cuts. Eric Adams requests complete dismissal of criminal case over alleged prosecutorial misconduct. Judge rejects Trump administration's request to delay nearly $2 billion in foreign aid payments. More than 500,000 people in Georgia and South Carolina warned to stay indoors due to air quality concerns. Contractor leaks over 400,000 tax returns, which exceeded the previous estimates. Snowfall leads to building collapses in New York. Real Housewives star Karen Huger was sentenced for her DUI, 1 year in jail, 1 year suspended sentence. The Interior Department suspends employee spending and travel amid budget concerns. 37% of contracts on the DOGE list predicted to save no money. And that's everything you missed while you were on the clock. Republican lawmakers in multiple states are coming for marriage equality. They're making moves to get the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell versus Hodges, the 2015 decision that made same-sex marriage legal nationwide. Ever since Roe was overturned in 2022, activists have warned that marriage equality would be next. Now, GOP legislators in Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana are passing resolutions to attack marriage equality. It started in Idaho when Republicans in the state house passed a resolution in January calling on the Supreme Court to reverse Obergefell. A few weeks later, North Dakota lawmakers did the same thing, saying they want marriage to go back to being one man and one woman. Now, similar efforts are popping up in Montana and South Dakota. None of these resolutions actually change the law of the land, but that's not the point. They're political statements meant to put pressure on the Supreme Court. And please understand that marriage equality was passed by a 5-4 margin, a slim margin. It's important to note that legally, the court can't just decide to overturn Obergefell unless a case challenging same-sex marriage lands on their desk. But that could happen if a state passes a law banning it, and these resolutions are laying the groundwork for exactly that. The thing is, a majority of Americans support marriage equality. A 2023 Gallup poll found that 69% of people in the United States think same-sex marriage should stay legal. Remember, everything is unprecedented until it's not. And with a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court and Republican lawmakers determined to drag the country backward, it's not hard to see where this is heading. If Roe v. Wade wasn't untouchable, Obergefell isn't either. They lied and people believe them, and now working class people are going to be paying the price. House Republicans have passed a budget that rips food and healthcare away from millions of working class Americans while showering the wealthiest with massive tax breaks. They promised to cut taxes for workers and seniors, but instead they're raising taxes on the poorest Americans, gutting Medicaid and food stamps, and adding trillions of dollars to the national debt, all to benefit their billionaire donors. Make no mistake, this is a tax plan for the rich, funded by the working class. The budget cuts at least $1 trillion from healthcare and food assistance programs while delivering trillions in tax breaks, with the wealthiest 5% receiving the largest share. Meanwhile, the poorest Americans will face the largest tax increases, and these cuts to Medicaid and food stamps will devastate working class families. The budget slashes $880 billion from Medicaid, Medicare, and ACA programs, leaving millions without health care. The GOP also cuts $230 billion from food stamps, pushing at least 40 million Americans, 1 out of 5 of them being children, into even greater hardship. Despite promising a balanced budget with no added deficit, this plan adds trillions to an already out-of-control national debt. Medicaid is a lifeline for at least 72 million Americans, with the states most reliant on it being New Mexico, Louisiana, New York, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Food stamps support at least 43 million people, with California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Pennsylvania having the highest numbers of beneficiaries. Despite Donald Trump's claims on Fox News that Medicare and Medicaid wouldn't be touched, guess what? He lied. This budget does exactly that. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, the trillions in tax cuts for the wealthy is almost identical to the amount being stripped from Medicaid and SNAP, specifically the $1 trillion. Republicans are forcing working class Americans to pay for handouts to their billionaire friends and their corporations. So once again, the GOP has shown that it serves the interests of the wealthiest Americans and not working class families. And this isn't a F around and find out moment either, because real people are going to be affected by this. The Supreme Court signaled that they would side with the woman who sued after alleging heterosexual discrimination. This case could make it easier for white, male, and straight workers to sue for job discrimination, but at the expense of those who have faced discrimination. The case involves involves Marlene Ames, an Ohio woman who says that she was treated unfairly at work because she's straight. In 2020, she lost her job as an administrator at a state agency, and the position was given to a younger gay man. She also claims that she was passed over for another job that went to a less qualified lesbian woman. But when she took her case to court, lower courts ruled against her, saying that she didn't even meet the higher standards required for workers in majority groups like men, whites, and straight people. This rule, called the background circumstances standard, is used in many appellate courts, including Ohio's. She argues that this rule is unfair and unconstitutional, saying it treats majority and minority groups differently and puts a bigger burden on people from majority groups when they're the ones being discriminated against. If the court rules to remove the rule, it could make it easier for people from majority groups to win discrimination cases, but it also weakens protection for those who faced real bias in the workplace. A decision is expected by summer 2025. Teachers' unions are standing up for students because our lawmakers sure aren't. In Maryland, a new lawsuit by the American Federation of Teachers and the American Sociological Association aims to take on the Trump administration. They're challenging a memo from the Trump administration that demands schools and universities stop race-based practices or risk losing federal funding. According to the Associated Press, the lawsuit argues that the memo is too vague and could stop teachers from discussing important topics like slavery, the treatment of Native Americans, and radical Reconstruction. The Education Department says that the Supreme Court's ruling on college admissions should apply to everything from hiring to graduation ceremonies, but unions and teachers believes that this oversteps the government's authority and puts teachers in a tough spot. The memo even threatens to shut down student groups based on race or background, like Black student unions or clubs celebrating different heritages. It also limits the ways that schools can recruit diverse student populations. Teachers and students could be forced to avoid discussing critical topics just to avoid losing federal funding. At its core, this lawsuit is about protecting the right to teach and learn the truth. Teachers should be able to cover the hard topics in history without fear of punishment or retribution. The AFT is asking the courts to block this memo so educators can keep doing their job without government interference. Teachers' unions are stepping up because when it comes to our students' education, someone's got to do it.